very happy to introduce Danielle Keller to you. Danielle was trained as a goldsmith, and she had her own brand in the beginning with her name, which involved designing and producing and marketing her own jewelry. But she was always interested in, where's all that stuff coming from? Where's that material coming from that I'm using? And there were no questions answered during the training, and so she decided to study it. But where do you study that? You can't really study. When you're in Germany, you can't really study it. There's no sustainable jewelry master. So she decided to study what comes closest, and that is at an academy for design, Mode und Design, in Berlin. That's where she got her master's degree. And she was very interested in issues of sustainability and environment during those studies, and did write her master's thesis about the supply chain and about the materials, and really did a toolkit that explained how you can make the whole process of something that seems totally unsustainable more sustainable. When she was done, I think at that point you approached me and asked whether you could do a PhD with me, which was, I mean, normally I like to accept PhDs on any potential topic, but those who know me, I know nothing about fashion, and even less about jewelry. I'm not an expert, or I said I can't do anything, but we met earlier this year, and I thought it would be wonderful if you could help us understand what you're doing, because I think it's totally fascinating to learn from you about all the process of mining and logistics and supply chains, and something that the professors, even though they came from many different subjects at the academy, couldn't teach you, but you've taught yourself to some extent, and you've also taught others. Like most recently, you're no longer designing jewelry, but Danielle is now teaching herself at universities. For instance, the last one was in Denmark, as you just told me. So I'm very happy that you're here, and we'll talk about this extremely conservative industry that is so slow moving, and you're a progressive person within this conservative industry. And since I met Danielle last time, something happened. She became two. And who you see, I think this is the first time that we have two people presenting here. And you can see Danielle and Aya here in front of you. And one last remark, because I typically ask, okay, you are welcome. One last remark, because I often ask, the discussants, is there something that we wouldn't expect? And so Danielle said, yes, of course. I am learning the lyrics of Eminem, of one of the big rap songs, I Lose Myself.
Lose Yourself.
Lose Yourself. And not just, lyrics, that's easy, but she's also rapping it. Anyways, with that, I think this is wonderful that to have you here, to have somebody who is a jeweler, goldsmith, environmentalist, and a rapper. Join me in welcoming Danielle Keller.
Hi, thank you very much for hosting me. Thank you, Christoph. I will start by saying that Aya here, she's 4 months old. It's the first time she's part of a sustainability discussion. So give her a break if she makes any noise, or we didn't had enough time to train this. So I hope it goes smooth, but yeah, bear with me. So as Christoph so nicely introduced me, I'm coming from the design, I have a design background. So I kind of reached the sustainability door backwards, kind of. So I know how to make things, and I work with materials so closely. And I was really bothered by not knowing where the gold that I was touching so closely, I smelled it in my nose, I felt it in my finger, on my skin. I didn't know anything about it. I knew it's a fabulous material to work with. It's super generous. I could totally understand why people fall for that, but I didn't know anything about it. The same for all the stones that I was working with, nothing. And when I started asking these kind of questions, like the suppliers that I was working with, everyone was looking at me like really strangely, like, why would you be interested in something like this? Or it's a stupid question, or like a lot of different kind of like angles towards that. And I understood that probably if I get like this kind of like quite strong responses, there is a reason for that. So maybe I didn't know like what are the right questions to ask, or I didn't ask the right people. So this is kind of like my journey towards sustainability, how it started. And as you can see in the map here, I don't know if you see it so clearly, but materials that are used for jewelry are coming actually from all over the world. There are like precious stones coming from Australia, US, even some parts of Europe, Africa, of course, Asia. But the same goes to every kind of mineral that we work with in the jewelry sector. So gold, you would get a similar map, maybe not the same countries, but like it's also coming from all over the world. And silver and diamonds, everything is traveling, moving from one hand to the other, and being processed in one place and then being shipped to the other place, being assembled as a product all together. And this is kind of like maybe a summary of maybe like the main countries where most of the supply chain is passing through. Of course, you can have an exceptions out of that, but like let's say that most of the materials are coming from the mining, and initial processing is coming from these kind of countries. Then refining and processing these days is coming from these main countries, and then producing the items and their components in these countries. Without getting really political, but as you know, like sustainability or like in general supply chains is really hard to avoid politics. For example, if we take mining and processing, you can see in the list Russia. And one of the biggest challenges that, for example, the jewelry industry faced in the last 2 years is diamonds, mainly coming from Russia. With a lot of countries trying to put sanctions towards Russia, but at the same time can't really guarantee if things are coming from Russia or not. So just I think this is a good example of showing partly the challenges that the traditional jewelry industry is facing when we're talking about sustainability these days. So I'm sure maybe you heard about like the impacts of mining. So this is a picture I really like by a German photographer, an aerial German photographer called Tom Hagen. It's a series he did on mining, and he basically flew with a helicopter taking aerial images of mining. And when you see these images, you actually understand the enormous impact that mining has. Usually mining are happening in rural areas where you still need to have generators, you still need to have electricity, you still need to have tractors or all the languages are mixing. But anyway, you need a lot of infrastructure in order to operate a mine, bringing employees back and forth, bringing food back and forth, bringing water. All of these create more and more and more stress on areas that are usually not connected to human activities. And this puts a lot of environmental pressure, but at the same time also a lot of social pressure, because these people may be traveling long distances, working in really dangerous working conditions. And this is just the beginning of the story, or like the beginning of the chain. This is an image that was shot in Africa. I forgot the specific country. I can look it up for you afterwards. But it's a community that is basically flooded with toxic water because of a ruby mine that is next to where the community is living. This means that they are constantly living around toxic water environment, This means that every water they intake in their daily life is completely toxicated, and this means that their children run in ponds that are toxic, and this is how things are operated. And it's not just happening in Africa, you can see it in a lot of other places. I think last year there was a big publication done by The Guardian that they were publishing that Colombian river was completely intoxicated because of gold mining and chemicals that were leaking into the river, and then all the communities that were basing their nutrition on fish coming from the river were having kids with disabilities, miscarriages. So in the end, like, we all know that it's all somehow interconnected. So once you live in a toxic environment, it's not isolated. Again, like, probably an image that maybe you haven't seen this one, but you can, when you think about mining, you can definitely imagine that this is not something that is occurring once. Like you see in a lot of situations, children that are mining or just hanging around in dangerous environments with dangerous tools that they shouldn't be exposed to, let alone not in any educational system. So as part of my research, I tried to kind of like accumulate all together or reorganize the supply chain and highlight the main challenges according to each supply chain step. So of course supply chains can be divided into many more steps and layers, but I try to simplify it without simplifying the problem. So in the higher row you can see the materials level, and then all the common problems that are associated with that. So we are talking from social aspects like corruption, conflict, civil wars happening in a lot of different areas around the world, mainly fighting over resources and finance. At the same time, heavy chemical use and heavy chemical waste, biodiversity loss. And as I started saying with the issue with Russia, for example, is the fact that the industry is completely opaque. So there is no traceability, no transparency. We actually don't know where things come from, where things pass through. And this exposes everyone along the supply chain to a lot of problems or weak points, as we see now with the Russia situation, and this is just an example. The second row is focused on design and product development, so everything around all the problems that are associated with that. So in a lot of situations, products are designed thinking about the short-term use, although we're talking about minerals that have enormous lifespan. So you know, when they were finding the Egyptian tombs, they were finding gold jewelry. So gold is gonna last way longer than we are gonna be here, the same as precious stones, but at the same time, most of the jewelry that we see in stores are designed for a short lifespan, although the materials are can be much longer used. Again, no traceability, no thinking about material waste, and no thinking about workers' well-being. Some of these problems are going all along the supply chain. Traceability is completely relevant to all steps, the same as workers' well-being, and everything around waste. So even in mass production or manufacturing level, there are a lot of issues around bad product planning, in a way that there is a lot of waste all along the supply chain. And this can be solid waste, but at the same time liquid waste, all along the supply chain. And the last row, which I find the most interesting, is actually the contradictory between the long lasting of the materials and the lack of reuse, recycling, circular economy mindset. So although gold and stones and diamonds can be reused or recycled, and they even have such high economical value that it would make sense to implement these kind of systems, you can barely see it, even as we speak now. So this kind of like completely went hand in hand with my perception of like, how come there are no more circular principles within the industry. So these are just like the main circular economy principles. I'm sure you're well aware of them. But I thought that it's really strange that there is not a mindset of rethinking waste and pollution in an industry that works with such high economical value materials. Again, like not thinking about like ongoing flow of materials and products. The other extra parameters like sourcing energy from renewable resources, I think it's a challenge that many supply chains and industries are now facing, let alone regenerative natural system or regenerating natural systems. But the last two parameters, separating biocycle and the tech cycle, is actually something that is already intertwined in the jewelry supply chain, because although all minerals are coming from nature, they are not bio-based, they are not going to compost, so they are all coming from the tech cycle. So this means that within the industry's regular operation, it makes sense to implement or to embrace this kind of like recycling, reusing of the materials. And at the same time, I found this quote by Hans Carl von Karlowitz. I don't know if you know him. He developed a theory about forestry. And I found it extremely relevant when we are talking about minerals, precious minerals. So it took the earth like millions of years to produce diamonds. So how come we use them for such a short time? You know, we should use each diamond for a million years. And I found this like sentence as kind of like a guiding light when I think about my perception of the jewelry industry. That these materials that I was working so closely with, it took the earth like magical conditions and such a long time that it made, in my opinion, a lot of sense to use them for as many years as it took the earth to produce them. So I built this model taking into consideration the conventional supply chain that you can see in the right part of like what would be the usual processes. So you would start with raw materials, then you would move to process materials, you would do design and sketching, then you would do prototype, then you get some kind of feedback of how the product behaves. You would fine-tune the design, then you would do another prototype, and then you would move on to mass production, and this part is like the end of the like production, so polishing and everything, like making the jewelry really shiny. But then like the upper left part of the cycle is how to kind of like insert into this whole process some circular principles. So how I can, within like the regular supply chain, how I can offer or interact with my customer or with my suppliers in order to offer some kind of circular strategies or circular processes. So part of that is offering like repairing. So for example, if you have like your ring is broken, then maybe it doesn't make sense to put it aside and buy a new one. It makes sense to go to your local goldsmith or to the chain where you bought the item and then repair it. Maybe at some point you would want to alter it, so you don't like the stone because it was from your grandma and you would want to replace it with something else. maybe you don't like the item at all, so it makes sense to separate all the materials into all the small different materials that the item is made out of, and remake them according to current standards. So it might mean repolishing the stone, it might be melting the gold, sorry, and then remake it into a new item. And as a last option, if you're like, I don't like jewelry, but I have this bunch of like my grandma's whatever old jewelry box, then maybe you can just give it away and get money in return, because gold equals money, diamond equals money. So I started thinking how these strategies can be integrated into like the concept of jewelry retail, or how the jewelry industry operates. Some of these are a bit too forward thinking, not because I'm a genius, but because they are not yet, nobody is brave enough yet to offer like something so provoking to a quite traditional industry. But some of these services are already offered. And I wanted, as a final for this really short talk, give you some examples, because I think they, at least for me, they bring me hope, and they also bring me the vision that this can make economical sense. Like all these, maybe some like super positive, happy, joy strategies. So repair as a business model. This, on the left side, is a British company. It's called The Restory. They're not yet offering their services for jewelry, but what they are offering is they are completely customized repair service company. And they are offering their services for luxury items, mainly bags, shoes, knitwear, really high quality. They have craftsmen people they have the know-how of how to fix things, that they would look exactly as they were before. So instead of buying a new Chanel bag, you can just repair your old one into a really high quality. This is an Italian jewelry brand called Pomeletto. They use this Japanese kintsugi technique of repairing broken stones. And I think this repair adds even more value to the stones, whereas how they looked before they were broken. So there are also a lot of ways which through repair you can actually make the value of the product even nicer. Resale platforms, I'm sure you maybe heard of that, offering products that are no longer being used, sold to second, third user. So this is one example, Circa. They are selling mainly fine jewelry and watches. So this is their specification. They have experts that know how to evaluate the diamonds, the metal, everything. So you would actually know that what you buy is actually what you buy, which is a big issue when we're talking about fine materials like gold, diamonds, and precious stones. And this is a really interesting advertisement from Patek Philippe, a really snoozy watch brand. And they write, you never own a Patek Philippe, you look after it for the next generation. And I think it really emphasizes the fact that these products are really long lasting. So you're actually just renting it for the time you're living on this planet. So I found it, although I'm not necessarily sure they're doing much around reselling or all of that, I found this as a concept really interesting. And these are a few interesting brands that are focusing on material and resource reuse and repurposing. Zenith is a watch brand. They did a line where all the watch straps were made out of leftovers from their maison's materials. So instead of cutting a small piece of leather to be your watch strap, they just use a lot of offcuts from different products that the brand is using. Ether diamonds, they are making their diamonds, they are producing lab-grown diamonds, but they are doing it through carbon capturing. So it's becoming not a common, but like a things that you can see more and more in the industry. And I think it's a bit hard for the traditional people within the industry to accept it, but again, like an interesting perspective of how you can transform materials into creating something. And Article 22, they are based in Laos, and they are working with local communities, transforming the outer parts of bums from the Vietnam War into jewelry. So apparently Laos has a lot of bombs that didn't explode within the Vietnam War, and besides the fact that it's really risky for a lot of communities, they are working with a local NGO that is responsible with disassembling the bombs and then transforming the metals into bracelets. So with every bracelet, you're actually saving communities from a really dangerous situation. Yes.